The Labor government's facing 5 anti-corruption investigations in Victoria. Active anti-corruption investigations. 5.
The list of questionable activity by John Setka is a mile long, including the current criminal charges he's facing on harassing a woman. Shouldn't the Labor Party have taken action a long time before now? But you have a relationship with the CFMEU, you take money from them and so forth.
What I have control over is the Labor Party. I'm not the leader of the CFMEU, I'm the leader of the Labor Party.
CFMEU's construction division is likely to be excluded from multi-employer bargaining.
Imagine you're a hard-working tradie showing up to a government construction site worth billions of taxpayer dollars. You think you're there to build infrastructure that will serve Australians for decades. But what you don't realise is that the union representing you has been completely infiltrated by organised criminal groups, bikie gangs and underworld figures who are using your workplace as their personal criminal enterprise. Welcome to the absolutely shocking world of the CFMEU. The Construction, Forestry, Maritime, Mining and Energy Union, where criminal organisations have systematically taken over one of Australia's most powerful unions and turned government construction projects into their own personal money-making schemes. This isn't just about union corruption, mate. This is about how criminal gangs have infiltrated the very heart of Australia's construction industry, costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars while using violence, intimidation and threats to maintain their grip on power. And the most infuriating part? Government officials have known about this for years, but continued awarding massive contracts to sites controlled by these criminal elements. Before we expose how criminal organisations have taken over Australia's construction industry with government complicity, if you want the uncensored truth about organised crime infiltration of our institutions, join our Patreon. We're the resistance, exposing the criminal networks that mainstream media won't investigate because they're too connected to political power. Link in the description. Let's start with what the CFMEU actually is, because understanding their power is crucial to grasping how devastating this infiltration has become. The CFMEU represents hundreds of thousands of workers across construction, forestry, maritime, mining and energy sectors. They have massive influence over government construction projects worth billions of dollars and maintain strong historical ties to the Australian Labor Party. But here's what's absolutely terrifying. According to a damning report by barrister Jeffrey Watson SC, the union has been infiltrated by bikie and organised crime figures who are operating in what he describes as a cycle of lawlessness. These aren't just a few bad apples. This is systematic criminal infiltration at the highest levels. Watson conducted 60 interviews and found that outlaw motorcycle gang members are holding official union positions, acting as delegates on major government projects and using violence and threats as standard operating procedure. Think about that for a second. Criminal gang members are officially representing workers on taxpayer-funded construction sites. The evidence was so overwhelming that on August 2024, the Albanese Labor government was forced to place the CFMEU's construction division into administration.
Today, Mr Setka's membership has been suspended by the National Executive Committee.
They appointed Mark Irving KC to oversee union operations because the criminal infiltration had become so severe that the federal government had to step in. But the real scandal is how these criminal elements have infiltrated massive government construction projects. In Victoria, they've taken over the state's multi-billion-dollar Big Build program, which includes the Metro Tunnel, level crossing removals and major infrastructure projects that are supposed to serve Victorians for generations. Victoria Police has been running Operation Hawk since July 2024, specifically targeting what they describe as serious and violent offending, including blackmail, extortion, assaults, and threats to life associated with the construction industry. They've had to deploy additional detectives because the criminal behaviour has become so widespread. In Queensland, the situation is even more outrageous. Premier David Crisafulli revealed that CFMU thuggery cost taxpayers an additional $22 million on just one project, the Centenary Bridge site. That's $22 million of your tax dollars wasted because criminal elements were deliberately disrupting work, blocking deliveries, and threatening workers. The Queensland government had to spend millions on additional fencing, lighting, CCTV and security just to protect workers from their own union representatives. They lost 70 days of work due to what Transport Minister Brent Mickelberg described as the CFMEU deliberately trying to interrupt critical construction tasks. The level of violence and intimidation documented in these reports will make your blood boil. Jeffrey Watson's investigation revealed that union officials were telling people, "There is a bullet with your name on it, and we know where you live." They were making threats at funeral services and systematically using violence against anyone who opposed them. One incident captured on dash cam shows more than 10 CFMEU members surrounding a car driven by rival union organisers, rocking the vehicle and shouting at those inside. Premier Crisafulli said this typified the thuggery of the CFMEU and noted that no one involved in that incident has ever been held accountable. But it gets worse. There are allegations of violence against women on construction work sites, including at level crossing removal sites. Premier Jacinta Allen said she was sickened to my core by footage showing alleged assaults on female workers. This isn't just about industrial disputes. This is about systematic violence and misogyny being used to maintain criminal control. The intimidation extends to government officials as well. Watson's report documented violence and threats against workplace health and safety inspectors and even politicians. When investigators tried to interview key figures, they encountered what Watson described as obstinate refusal to cooperate from critical witnesses and widespread memory loss, classic signs of witness intimidation. Let's talk about some of the key players in this criminal network, because these aren't anonymous thugs. These are people who held positions of enormous power and influence. John Setka, the former Victorian CFMEU secretary, stood down amid explosive allegations of criminal behaviour and union corruption. He was one of the most powerful union leaders in Australia, with direct access to government ministers and massive influence over construction policy.
If John Setka is expelled from the Labor Party, he can still carry on as Victorian Secretary of the CFMEU, am I right?
Well, that's right. I mean, he's elected as the Secretary of the Union, and that's a matter for the Union.
In Queensland, Michael Ravbar, the former CFMEU Secretary, has been accused of cultivating a culture of violence within the union. When Jeffrey Watson tried to interview him as part of the investigation, Ravbar declined multiple requests and refused to cooperate. His Assistant Secretary, Jade Ingham, also refused to participate in the investigation. In New South Wales, CFMEU Secretary Darren Greenfield allegedly boasted of corrupt connections to the $94 billion SEEB superannuation fund. Think about that. A union official bragging about corrupt influence over workers' retirement savings. CBIS is chaired by former Labor Treasurer Wayne Swan, showing just how deep these political connections run. These people weren't operating in the shadows. They were holding official positions, attending government meetings and influencing policy while allegedly running criminal operations on the side. The financial cost to Australian taxpayers is absolutely staggering. In Queensland alone, the CFMEU's criminal behaviour added $22 million to a single project. When you multiply that across hundreds of government construction projects over years, we're talking about hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars being stolen through deliberate delays, inflated costs, and criminal interference. But it's not just direct costs. There's also the ghost shifts scam on the Melbourne Metro Tunnel, where wages were allegedly paid for work that was never performed. 2 CFMEU delegates were sacked amid allegations that a labour hire company was paying for shifts that never happened. That's taxpayer money going directly into the pockets of criminals. The Victorian government has had to spend millions on additional security, fencing, lighting and CCTV just to protect workers from their own union representatives. Every dollar spent on security because of criminal intimidation is a dollar that could have been spent on hospitals, schools or infrastructure that actually benefits Australians.
Well, the ACTU Secretary Sally McManus said on this program back when she got the job that when laws are unjust, she doesn't see a problem with breaking them. Do you endorse that attitude?
I support people complying with the law, whether they're unions or businesses.
Here's what makes this scandal even more infuriating. Government officials have known about this criminal infiltration for years, but continued awarding massive contracts to sites controlled by these criminal elements. The Victorian government kept funding big build projects while knowing that organised crime figures were operating on the work sites. Premier Jacinta Allen claims the government has zero tolerance for criminal behaviour, but her government continued working with CFMEU-controlled sites for years after the criminal infiltration became obvious. She met with police chiefs and expressed shock at the allegations. But where was this concern when taxpayers were funding projects controlled by criminal organisations? The Queensland Government is now holding a commission of inquiry that will run for about a year and cost millions more in taxpayer funds. Premier Crisafulli described it as the strongest lever available to the government. But why did it take years of criminal behaviour before they used this lever? The federal Labor government was eventually forced to place the union into administration, but only after the criminal infiltration had become so obvious that they couldn't ignore it anymore. The High Court upheld the government takeover in June 2025, but by then, how much taxpayer money had already been stolen?
As Labor leader, will you be happy to work with and to take money from an organisation with that track record?
Well, the fact is there are also employers in the construction industry that have had real issues. This is a dangerous industry. If you don't have unions in the construction sector, what you'll have is an increase beyond the already very high numbers of people who are victims. Literally, in terms of fatalities.
The most disturbing aspect of this entire scandal is how the CFMEU's traditional ties to the Labor Party may have provided political protection for these criminal operations. The union has been a major Labor supporter, providing significant financial contributions to Labor campaigns and maintaining enormous influence over Labor construction and industrial relations policy. When Labor governments award major contracts to CFMEU-dominated construction sites, are they inadvertently funding criminal organisations? When Labor politicians meet with union leaders who are allegedly connected to organised crime, what does that say about the integrity of our political system? The opposition has been calling for royal commissions and stronger action, but Labor governments have been reluctant to take decisive action against one of their key supporters. How many years of criminal behaviour could have been prevented if political considerations hadn't protected these criminal networks? The mainstream media barely scratches the surface of this story because it exposes how deeply criminal organisations have infiltrated our political and industrial systems. They won't tell you about the political protection, the government complicity, or how your tax dollars are funding criminal enterprises. Join our Patreon for uncensored investigations into the criminal networks that have captured Australia's institutions. This scandal isn't over. The Queensland Commission of Inquiry is just beginning. Victoria police operations are ongoing, and more criminal charges are likely. But the damage to public trust and taxpayer funds has already been done. When criminal organisations can infiltrate major unions and operate on government construction sites for years, the system is fundamentally broken. To see the latest Australian crisis, click this video here.